All right, we're back. We'll finish the lecture zero slides today. I just wanted to get back to start from the welfare argument first. Make sure that everyone knows how to work the demand and supply graph that we have here. So because we want to do that, we'll want to use this one. We'll want to draw our own demand and supply. P is in the y-axis and Q, pardon me for my bad handwriting, is on the x-axis. So we will draw a demand function here, like that. And here is a supply function here. Now, what we're saying in particular for a quantity, and here I'm just going to draw it here, right? This is Q1, right? At Q1, this will be the quantity demanded, and this will be the willingness to pay of the Q1th consumer. And then if you go up here, this is what is required for companies to produce Q1, which I will just write as PH here. Now, we can draw or shade in the areas of producer and consumer surplus, which I can do right now. So this area, which will be shaded in highlighted blue, there's this area here. I want to delete that. There you go. Nope. We have to draw. And we're shading this area here. And this area here is consumer surplus. We'll draw, let's see this here. Now this area, which I will shade in with a different color, let's say it's green, this will be producer surplus, this triangle here, right? And you can shade that little triangle there. And that area is called producer surplus, which all of these things should be familiar to everyone in their old, previous macro courses, right? And you reckon these using the quantities Q1, PH, and PL on the supply and demand curves. Now the problem is this triangle here, which is gray. Okay. This is the deadweight loss. For producing greater than the competitive output. Intuitively, you'll see that in order to produce Q1, people need to be paid, firms need to be paid, and the amount of the subsidy is this one, right? And the amount of the subsidy is greater than the total increase of producer and consumer surplus, which are these ones and then these ones here. So this is sort of the excess subsidy required. Another interpretation is that for quantities greater than QC, leading to Q1, the cost of producing these units is greater than the willingness to pay. See, that's this distance here. Okay. And this triangle is basically adding up all of these distances, right? And once you add them up, that's basically the dead weight loss to society of producing this much output. But some people who are consuming it aren't really valuing it as highly as the cost of producing it. And that's why it's a dead weight loss here. All right, so that's the interpretation for this one, competitive output, right? and comparing the non-competitive outputs Q prime here and QG, which neither of which maximizes total surplus, and it is QC that maximizes total surplus. Okay. So you might think that QG is good because you're producing a lot, but actually you are developing this triangle here of perfect loss. Our next topic is monopoly. Okay, so this is the most important thing. So we want to spend some time doing homework for monopoly versus perfect competition, and we want to spend some time thinking about how monopoly is important. Okay. All right. Or what monopoly is and what the differences between monopoly and perfect competition is. So here's the big difference. The other side versus perfect competition is monopoly, when the seller is large enough, so large that selling to the entire market demand is possible. The monopolist can lower the price because it sells enough to satisfy market demand. Okay, that means it's moving along the demand curve, which we will see soon. It then faces a trade-off for selling more. Sell one more unit, but then the drawback is the price for everything you are selling falls by the change in P, which is the demand function. Okay, so this is the illustration of the constraint faced by the monopolist. So say you're starting at P1 and you're selling at Q1. Now you're interested in selling more from Q1 to Q2. But then, because you are aware of the demand curve, price now changes as you change your output sold. As you sell more, you'll realize that the price of all of the products that you've sold will fall down to P2. Okay. So that's why there's a gain here, which is a gain in more output sold. But then there's a loss in that this is the loss of the inframarginal units, meaning that's not marginal, that's less than Q1. The price sold on the inframarginal units goes down, like this. So there's a gain versus loss, which you are measuring or weighing against each other. So the monopolist can feel along the demand curve. It knows or would know the elasticity of demand. So this is definitely related to what's called the elasticity of demand, which, if you remember, is this formula here. More intuitively, it's this one. It's the percent change in quantity divided by the percent change in price. And you're aware that as you're increasing your quantity, your price will go down. And that's what this is. This is the elasticity of demand. It's the measure of this trade-off between quantity and price that the monopolist is sort of weighing against each other. So now a monopolist will have to factor in this price effect when it decides to sell one more unit as a cost. You can think of it as a cost of selling one more unit, in addition to the marginal cost of production. Now, MR is equal to MC remains the optimality condition. But MR is not just P now, as we've just noted. MR is P plus the derivative of P with respect to Q times Q. Note that the derivative of the demand function is negative, so that MR is less than P for a monopolist. Okay. So it's interesting to think about this one first, right? The marginal revenue for the monopolist is less than the price of the marginal unit because of this effect here, that it lowers the price of all the inframarginal units. And that's why the gain of selling more is less for a monopolist than for a perfectly competitive firm. So that's what a marginal revenue is, the gain of selling one more unit in terms of revenue. It's less. Now, this is an illustration using curves. In addition to MR is equal to MC, we can also measure the industry or monopolist profit. So here we will look at the equilibrium first. This is MC. And this line here is the marginal revenue function. And we're looking at the equality of marginal revenue and marginal cost, which is the following, this dot here. And that's QM. That's how you determine QM, the equality of marginal revenue and marginal cost. How would you get the monopolist price? Well, you feed the quantity of the monopolist to the demand curve, and that's what gives you the price here. So that's the optimality condition, right? This graph here also shows you industry profits. Okay, PM is greater than average cost QM. In this case, even with positive profits, there is no entry. So this figure also shows the long run equilibrium. Okay, so the profit here is just this square because it's PM minus AC times the change in quantity, or the quantity, QM minus 0.